So we tried on Facebook Live and it wasn't playing ball today for us. So I'm really, really happy to see lovely Helen here, because I haven't seen her in person for a year now, and nearly a year, isn't it? And I'm so happy to see her and catch up with her. And I asked her on a video call yesterday if she wanted to do this, and I thought maybe I'll throw her in the deep end a little bit, but now she's up for it. So I'm really, really happy, because Helen is the most gorgeous, glorious, graceful Shiatsu practitioner, but my sister-in-law as well. And she is the person that I most love to go to for body work. And she ties so much into her Shiatsu practice that it just brings me right into where I need to be. So Helen is coming back in a month or so, is that right? From sailing, end of May, is it?
Yeah, just under a month. It'll be a little while before I can practice, got a quarantine and all that business, but I'll be back from around June time.
Great. And she's going to be setting up her Shiatsu practice in Bristol, is that right? Is that where you settled on for a while?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm going to be splitting time between Bristol and your wellness space. It's such a great place that's worked for me to practice before, so I'm hoping that I can slip back in there.
That would be wonderful. So she's going to be here. So for any of you that know the space up here, or anyone that is local to Bristol, you can see her in Bristol. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk to Helen and ask for her take on, and for her, give her some space to share where her boundaries are, how they feel for her, what they bring up for her, and see if there's anything that Helen has to share about her boundaries that might help other people that are listening and watching, and might trigger a few thoughts and reactions in people that are just beginning to get into their boundaries, or think there's certain things they want to work with, and that sort of thing. So Helen, where are your boundaries?
Where are my boundaries? Well, I thought I might start by telling you where they are right now, sort of talking through what's happening for me right now in this encounter, because whenever you come into a meeting, I'm meeting with you, Ruth, and for a while there was a potential of meeting with a group of individuals unknown to me, and there's potential there for an encounter, and so there's a boundary that just occurs then between me and those people. So what's happening for me is I have a kind of a rising sort of sensation of pressure that's coming upwards in my body. And you can probably hear my voice is a little bit wobbly. So that's happening as this sort of coming to this potential meeting. And also for me, I'm recognizing it now. I kind of expected it, because this is what my sort of pattern of experience is, coming into any relationship that has any kind of pressures, or I mean, what relationship doesn't have pressures attached to it? There's a sort of slight numbing of my body and a kind of rising sensation. So I know that I'm kind of less able to be in contact with my physical sensations. So that's something I know that happens, and it's happening now when I'm encountering a boundary. So I have known and experienced for a long time that encountering other people, coming into relationship with other people, has this kind of, there's pressures around it. And I was actually thinking when you asked me yesterday about where my boundaries, I thought about, in fact, I've been thinking, because the emails have been coming through about the new course, and I came along to an afternoon workshop with you when that course was sort of in its first iteration. And at that time, what really I was sitting with quite strongly was that I felt and feel quite very defended and kind of hard in my boundaries, that my boundaries are quite they feel like a constraint on me that makes it difficult for me to like, I have a hard time moving into intimacy with, you know, with people, and a hard time accepting care, like receiving across that boundary as well. And also, I quite strongly at the time was the shame came up, which was a surprise to me at the time, because I had the shoulds came in right away. Like, I should be able to be comfortable in relationship. I should be able to be open and giving and receiving, all those things. And as soon as the shoulds come in, of course, the shame come with that word. If you should be able to do something, you can't. There's shame there. And probably also related to my training. So I was right in the middle of my Shiatsu training then. I'm just approaching the end of it now. And that work is in relationship. The ultimate value of healing body work is that you come into a relationship and you find a live encounter with a person, and that in there is the potential for healing. So all those stories about, I'm not going to be you know, a good practitioner, I'm not going to be able to do what I want to do because of these things are holding me back. But then I've kind of been like gradually sort of deepening down and being with that sense of like over boundariedness, and also through studying the philosophy that comes with Shiatsu, which is from the Taoist philosophy that is very strongly about yin yang balance. And what in Shiatsu, what we're trying to achieve in the therapy is a more healthy balance between elements and energies. So I had this extreme feeling of over boundariedness, and as I slowly examined it, I realized that that was there, it still is there, in relationship with the another extreme of feeling very unboundaried, very lost in a way, and that hyper boundariedness is a response to that. So I'll see if I can speak a bit more about the other part of the puzzle. I'm aware of, I talked at the beginning about this sense of kind of traveling out of my body and coming up and losing a sense of this. And I've discovered that often in relationship, the fear that comes, then I respond to that by trying to control the situation. And one way of controlling the situation is trying to understand what this other person in the relationship with me, what are they expecting, what are they wanting, what are they needing, and really trying to check in with that before anything to make sure that I can be what they want, that I can provide what they need, because somehow that feels like a safer place to be in relationship with someone. So I've experienced this coming out of the body and coming into the other person's experience, which essentially is a fantasy of mine. I've made up something in my mind about what you need from me, and I'm living that out. I'm trying to provide that. That's not as live and real as finding a way to know what you need and want, and like communicate with clarity across the boundary between you and me. So what happens in that kind of coming out into someone else, a fantasy of someone else, and I lose a sense of my body, what I need, where I'm at, what my feelings are in that moment. And there's a kind of like, I'm kind of absent in that moment, or merged. I've kind of gone and I've merged in, and I think there's like quite a lot of talk about, when we come to boundaries, about merging, and another word is like confluence. You come together with someone else's want or need and you lose sight of something in here. So in response to that feeling of merging and loss, then comes in the hard boundary to try and regain some ground, but that's imbalanced. So that's kind of where I sit, and I'm sort of doing lots of processing with all this over time, and it's particularly vital in my practice, because what I want to be able to come into when I come into a session is a clarity of a communication. There is a boundary between us. I'm here, you're there, and how do we meet? And if I'm worrying about what you want, I'm not really quite there, and the communication doesn't happen. And in this philosophy as well, in the Shiatsu training, that boundary is, we talk about it all the time, we work with it all the time. And so some of my work with it is kind of physical. Where do I feel this sort of merging and loss of self in a way, and where do I feel this constrict? And that some people might recognize that this constriction I feel right across my chest, through my arm, and there's I have a sort of chronic tightness here and around here, which I try through practices to just listen to, really, rather than trying to shift and change it. Just, okay, that's there. And this place along the body is the meridian that carries the energy of what's called the heart protector, or the pericardium. It's a big, strong muscle around the heart. So it has this function of negotiating all our intimate relationships, what comes in, what goes out. And so have this kind of tightness that closes in my body. So I sort of try and work at it from that angle, see what happens if I remember that this can be open and more energetically free. Yeah, so that's a lot. I feel like I've tried to draw like a picture of this sort of cycle that I find myself in and slowly working at.
That's amazing. Thank you, Helen. I love that you can inspire us with the eloquence of your body and what your body says, you know. So I think that's a language that a lot of us haven't practiced and haven't been taught, you know, how to hear what our body's telling us. I don't know if you ever worked with Simone, but our friend Simone is in the course, and she's a great body person, a body worker, and she's communicating and helping us learn to hear what our bodies are saying in these moments. And how you've just communicated it is such an inspiration. Sort of gets me going on, my thought processes going on how, yeah, come back into the body and listen to it. It's really brilliant. I love it.
That's my touchstone, really. I'm slowly learning how to listen with more subtle awareness, and then always remind myself that's the place to go if I want to find my integrity, and if I want to find vitality in communication, then I've got to be in here. I've got to listen.
Gorgeous. Can you think of, and you can go on and off this subject as you wish, but can you think of any situations that, and any situations and any sort of thought or talk through the process of how you would then ask yourself, where is my boundary in this? You know, how do you make space in a conversation with friends, for example, to check in with yourself? And obviously it's an ongoing practice for you, for me, for all of us. None of us are doing it perfectly. This is about practice, isn't it? Can you think of anything that comes to you about that?
Yeah, I suppose I can't think of any precise kind of scenario, but I can definitely get the sense of those moments where there's a feeling of rush. I often find a feeling of like things are getting carried away. Like if it is in a conversation, say, I mean, as simple as if somebody says something and I know my values don't agree with that somehow. And obviously there's a lot of things to balance with, like, what is the social situation? Do I need to put my neck out? Is it relevant right now? But giving myself the breathing space, basically, to check and say, what are my values saying about that? And very often the fear comes again, like if I'm going to say something that might contradict you, that's quite frightening. So you sort of weigh up, is it worth, you know, fighting this one? But ultimately, it has to be breath for me, always, always. As soon as you take a breath, so often in my life, I realized, oh, I haven't breathed. This is why there's something is tightening and creeping in, and somehow I'm not here anymore. I'm here in not quite the, you know, that live way. And the breath can only be real, can only be right now. That in breath, it's happening right now. I can feel it coming into my body, and usually that will help me to then get some awareness of what's happening. You know, is there a question coming up? Is there some anger that it is asking to be heard? It's just that breath and space is really the only thing I found. I mean, also having like a morning practice of coming into, like, you know, energetic awareness of my body, and so I can kind of remember, because I was only there a few hours ago, I knew what it felt like to feel what was going on inside, so I can kind of touch in with that. And as soon as I take a breath, that place is there, in an ideal world. But
Yeah.
many times things just happen too fast, and only on reflection can I say, that didn't match with my values. I didn't act how I would have liked to act. It's a long game.
So one of the things that I've covered with a few people in the course is the question of what do we do once or if our boundaries have been crossed? And obviously it's very different in different situations, because some things will, you know, be an extreme trauma of having our boundaries crossed, when other things might just freeze us slightly. So there's this huge spectrum of how that might feel and how that might be expressed. But do you have anything that you would come to, anything that you would do in the moment that you realize, oh, my boundary has been crossed here? What do you think would be your thing that you would do?
Such a good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that yet, actually. I don't know. I mean, I know that my habit is to, like, close down. Yeah, I haven't found my way through that yet. I kind of, I mean, I go into my reactive shutdown.
Shut down and freeze is a response, isn't it? Yeah. It's, you know, people would, you might think that that's an unhealthy response, and maybe it's not ideal, but it is a response, and it is a way of protecting.
Yeah, that's what the heart protector is there for. It's got
exactly.
a job.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and with trauma, you know, our trauma responses are there for a reason, and they are there to protect us.
Yeah.
So they're doing something helpful. Yeah. And then being able to come back to it at some point in the future to check in and see, is this freeze response that I'm still holding, is that maybe from that situation then, and then being able to work with that in the future.
Yeah.
So interesting. I love your insights. Thank you, Helen. Is there anything that's popping to mind before we finish the call that you'd like to share?
There's nothing really that comes to mind. I feel like we've covered so much, and actually I'm just now with your last question, and what my response to that is, it's so vital not to step, you know, with our big feet on these responses, which are valid, rooted, they're protective. And if, you know, if there's anything I tried to do in my practice, is just to with compassion witness and hold those responses that are there for very good reason, and only through witnessing them, giving them some compassionate space, can they be, you know, massaged into something else that you might prefer to live with. So I think that's such a great point you made.
Thank you so much for being with us, Helen. If you, after the call, if you feel like, oh, there's this thing and there's this thing, just write them down and I can add them in underneath in a comment underneath the video. Because obviously we're working with a time constraint of a boundary, so we can, you know, play with that.
Lovely.
Yeah. It's been so good to see you.
Great pleasure. Love you.
Love you too. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.